I want to preface this video by saying it's much easier to talk about emotional abuse than actually being one to experience the emotional abuse and the suffering that comes with it. Emotional abuse can be a very painful, frustrating, and difficult process to live through, and there's often a victim and a perpetrator. So emotional abuse can come from infidelity, perhaps it's from a form of betrayal, perhaps it's someone very close to that person, maybe intimately, or as a caregiver that's putting someone down, calling them bad names or derogatory comments. Maybe it's even witnessing that happening in others, such as a children witnessing that within their parents. So if there's someone who's a victim in emotional abuse or in a relationship with a domestic partner, there is a national hotline in the United States one can call, which is 1-800-799-7233. But from a Christian perspective, I think first and foremost that health and healing is going to become through forgiveness. Forgiveness does not necessarily mean that the actions will be forgotten, but there needs to be forgiveness of the person who has committed the evil act. So the person themselves needs to be forgiven. People are made in God's image and God's likeness, and people unfortunately choose to be evil or to act evil. It's okay to hate the act, but not hate the person themselves. Pray for them. Maybe write in a journal about your thoughts and feelings or frustrations to try to let it out. Maybe you could write them a letter. You don't necessarily have to give it to them, but just a way for you to process some of that anger or animosity. You could talk to a therapist or a spiritual guide about some of the hurt or pain or negative emotions that you're feeling. You could write it out in a journal. Writing it out in a journal can help to separate oneself from the negativity and help more likely to bring the positivity in one's life. Be sure to not retaliate nor seek revenge. That's just going to make the negative emotions and anger to linger. We see several examples in the Bible about people who have practiced forgiveness in cases of emotional abuse or trauma. Take David, for example, when he had the opportunity to kill King Saul, when King Saul was chasing him and threatening his life. David did not kill King Saul. He was distressed even at cutting King Saul's robe and just trusted that King Saul was someone made by God, one of God's people, and that he had respect for King Saul, even though King Saul was acting wrongly. We see how Christ forgave those who crucified him and how St. Stephen forgave those who stoned him to death. So the second principle after forgiveness, and this is in no particular order, but choose one's friends wisely. St. Paul states, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? What communion has light with darkness?" Now sometimes there are people, even Christians, who act evil. But I think the message here is to be careful with people that you're close with, especially people who you're intimate with. Sometimes it might be necessary to stay away from people who are angry or prone to emotional abuse or prone to things that are not right. It's okay and sometimes necessary to keep distance from certain people and be very selective with who is in your inner circle. I think this is especially true in people who are sexually active and they're not in a mature part in their life, maybe financially, psychologically, career-wise, that to be sexually active with someone else. And that's why so much of the Christian dogma and faith encourages people to save sex for marriage, so that by the time one is married, hopefully they can trust the people to be so intimate with and they won't deal with some of this abuse that can happen. Last and not least is focus on the heavenly kingdom. C.S. Lewis has a great quote in which he says, "Aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you will get neither." So really all of the biblical examples that mention David, Christ, St. Stephen, these guys all realize that earth is going to vanish away at some point, and they aimed their thoughts, their mind, their attitude towards heaven. They aimed on the heavenly kingdom. And so really this is going to involve praying, doing good deeds, being kind and helpful to other people. I think this will be an incredibly important area of focus in order to deal with emotional abuse and to forgive those who are the perpetrators. So earlier in the video, I mentioned how you can express oneself with journaling, and this is so much what happens in the Psalms. With David and his Psalms, he expresses his thoughts and feelings to God, and often he's describing some of the suffering or the pain or the anguish that he's going through. And you can see by the end of the psalm that he often sees the good that's going to come out of it. He trusts that God is going to provide at the right time. He trusts that he's going to be healed, and basically God is going to revenge for him. David doesn't have to take the revenge or retaliation on himself. So another sermon that I heard recently suggested that it's through the pain or the difficult circumstances that often victory is just going to be on the other side of it. So just persevere, try to get through it, and victory can come. But neither this type of pain or suffering is easy to do on one's own. Be sure to check with your doctor or mental health specialist about ways in your particular case, if you're going through this, to deal with some of the trauma or abuse that you're going through. Maybe it's medications, maybe it's therapy, maybe it's the combination of the two. But hopefully this helps to shed some light on some Christian ways that one can deal with emotional abuse.